Robin Zander, scene A1.
Hello and welcome back to Snafu. I'm Robin Zander, and each week I sit down with an author, a founder, an entrepreneur to talk about leadership, the future of work, and influence. Today's guest is a new upcoming author. She has a book coming out in March of 2027, Lindsey Caplan. Who is Lindsey Caplan? She started her career as a production assistant and screenwriter in Hollywood, transitioned into learning development at name brand companies like Zendesk and Credit Karma, and for the last 6 years has been an organizational design consultant at The Gathering Effect. Her new book is called Moved. It's talking about the forces that move us, how we can move other people, and how to use pull, not push, in order to make the difference that we want in the world. In this podcast interview, we talk about the creative process, why it took her more than 9 years to write this book, and what all of us can do to influence more without using pressure to build the world that we want. I hope you enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with my friend, Lindsey Caplan. Here we are. Lindsey, thanks so much for sitting down for a podcast interview today.
Absolutely. Hey, Robin, good to see you.
This is a fun throwback for me. A lot of the podcasts that I've been doing in the last couple of years have been about the future of work, of course, because of Responsive Conference, about storytelling due to Xander Media, and about influence due to sort of the new Snafu Conference. But when we scheduled time to sit down, it was very much about the creative process, which I feel like is baked into everything that I do, but isn't something I talk about publicly as much now as I did maybe 10 years ago when I was getting started with both Robin's Cafe and Responsive. So maybe as a place to start, what's your relationship with the creative process? And I will maybe shout out Seth Godin as I ask the question. I have a water flask on my desk here that he handed me that says, "No such thing as writer's block." So if that's a riffing point for you, I'd love to hear your thoughts on creativity.
Oh, that's so interesting. Where that makes me think of is there's probably a meme out there or, some Instagram post about like, I'm great, I suck, this is great, this sucks. Like this roller coaster of what it's like to sort of be a creative person. I believe we're all creative, or to put a creative idea out in the world. And I resonate so deeply with that roller coaster ride. And so that's what it makes me think of. But it is incredibly fulfilling in so many ways. So a ride worth taking.
In what ways do you practice what Twyla Tharp would call the creative habit?
Oh, man. To be totally honest with you, so my first career was as a screenwriter in Hollywood. I studied screenwriting in college at Northwestern, and I moved to LA and worked in TV and film for a few years. And that creative hat was so key to my identity. And then I left LA and I came to San Francisco and did a bunch of things that we could talk about, maybe not talk about. And it's only been in the past couple of months when I submitted my book manuscript to my publisher that I now feel like that identity is back. And so that question of like creative habit or what makes you creative, I haven't allowed myself to have that identity for so long that now it just feels really good to sort of be back in that space. And so the way that I feel creative is by writing all the time. And it's fun how things come back around in the ways that you don't expect.
Let's go into your background a little bit because you kind of gloss over it. But you've worked in L&D, you've worked in learning and development for a bunch of name brand companies. And before that, like, if you will, talk about some of the shows and movies that you worked on because they're recognizable names.
Yeah. I worked at Malcolm in the Middle. I worked on Curb Your Enthusiasm. I worked on The Amazing Race for a little while. I worked at a couple of production companies, and one in particular who helped writers and directors, advance their careers and get their ideas into market. So learning about how creative ideas get bought and sold. I loved hanging out on TV sets and in production offices. And it was It was the only career that I thought I wanted for a really, really, really long time. I was so just laser focused on this was the only thing I was going to do. And I vividly remember I wouldn't let my parents throw me a graduation party because I had to move to LA literally right away. I remember it so vividly. And then, as things do, dreams change a lot, which is something I don't think I expected in my 20s.
Hmm. We've gotten to know each other through Responsive and through, I think, your work in gathering, but also your background in L&D. But again, before we go into some of the name brand companies you've worked for and obviously what you do today, I don't know, when did your desire to come on movie sets, where did that come from? Like tell a story from that era, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I was really into TV. Specifically, I wanted to work in TV. So, TV as a kid, I remember trying to think of a specific example. I just remember we had a family friend who worked at Warner Brothers. And so I was very lucky in that we bugged this person a lot, and I got to go to many tapings of the television show Friends. And I remember sitting in the audience being like, I want that gig, not on stage, but all those writers huddling together to figure out like what the best joke was. I want that. The idea of sitting in a room with 12 other really funny, creative people riffing on ideas just felt like the promised land to me. Um, but as I discovered now looking back, that fascination about why characters do what they do, what they're motivated by, how they change, who they meet, kind of all of that, thinking of the psychology behind it was kind of there in the background for me in ways that I couldn't really compute back then. But that fascination with people and human behavior at the time was just filtered through television and movies.
It's fun to me to hear that because I knew nothing about movies. I didn't have a television growing up. I thought zero about television sets or actors. I still don't know my wife makes fun of me because I don't know the name of any actors at all. If you give me a name, I won't recognize their face. And yet, we have spent thousands, tens of thousands of dollars renting airplane sets in Hollywood to make
Mm.
commercials, right? And so I came into film on the other side of it where I wanted to tell stories to change human behavior and thus found myself making not movies, but, 60-second commercials. Um, what was your transition into L&D?
Very lucky, very random. Again, was not like, oh, I'll do this and then I'll do this and then I'll do this. When I left Los Angeles, I moved back to the Bay Area, which is where I'm from, and I randomly applied for a job in the training department. It's called Training and Artistic Development at DreamWorks Animation, which at the time had a studio up here in the Bay Area, and luckily got that job, and had a couple of wonderful bosses and mentors who are still very important to me, who kind of helped me realize that there was someone who was them, usually, someone who was scripting the learning experience of how to get people from A to B,
Interesting.
similar to how a character or a story would get from A to B. And I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
there's a writer
So
doing
the
this.
characters
Mm-hmm.
are employees, not people on screens.
Exactly, exactly. And there's similar muscles that you employ. Observation of people is one, empathy, putting yourself in people's shoes, and understanding motivation. The part that, and I hope, or I think that muscle was already strong. The part I intentionally learned and am still a student of is how people learn, how people change, how organizations change, and often what gets in the way. So that once that kind of was illuminated to me, that really set me down a different path, which I think um, gave me more purpose, I feel, than what I thought I was seeking in the previous career.
Hmm. What did you apply? And I'm sure we'll come back to these earlier parts of the career and what you learned there that you've applied now, and especially in the creative process of writing your new book. But um, what are some? I think about the things about human nature that never change, particularly in the world of AI, particularly in the accelerating rate of change that we're all living through in 2026 and beyond. What are some of the consistent components of human behavior and human thought and human motivation that you pulled from storytelling on Hollywood sets into L&D and then into your work today?
A lot. I mean, I think a couple that come to mind is stakes. So every character has something at stake for them that kind of propels the story forward. And I know you don't watch a lot of those things, but so I could list examples like, I don't know. But I often cite, shows like Severance, where the character Mark wants to know what happens to his wife. And that is, something very high at stake for him. And that propels the story forward so that you know what he cares about. And then you then care about him. And so in learning experiences or anytime we're trying to influence someone to do something differently, if we don't know what's at stake for them or what they care about, it's really hard to design with them in mind. And I think often in learning, especially, or in training, we think that knowledge or information is the thing that's going to move people. And ultimately, that's a factor, but it's not the end game.
Or
So,
with
yeah.
employees' compensation, right? Like
Yeah. I think
compensation matters, of course, but that's not the only thing that will result in a person working or not working for a company.
yeah, to your point, it's about motivation, right? I think we have a limited sense of these levers of money or titles as being the driving factor, and there's a lot of research about those being limited in their long term motivation. So those are a couple of things. There's a ton more, but motivation, stakes, a clear want, knowing what people care about. We see that phrase in so many things in the world today, but it's true for writing a character. If you don't know what they care about, the choices that you make as a writer can feel very off to an audience. So it has to be very clear.
Jumping into the writing process of your book, let's just go to the broad of like what is this book for? What is this book about?
Yeah, this is, I think, maybe the first time I'm talking about this
I'm honored.
super publicly. I've been working on this for 9 years. Don't do that at home. But 9 years. It's called Moved, and it's about how people, especially groups, are moved emotionally and behaviorally, usually in a group setting. And the lessons in this book come from my background, come from entertainment, from education, from business, about people who are able to affect folks to care, to change, to engage, to act in a specific kind of way. And it'll be out in March of 2027.
Nice. I love, first of all, thank you for sharing first here. I wasn't expecting you to share the title. I'm touched. Why now? Why is this an important topic to you, both personally and do you believe in the world today?
I mean, to me personally, there's many reasons why I'm writing this. I think first and foremost, and this is a lesson from my old background too, but I think a lot of what people want in life is to feel seen and to feel heard. And that may sound cheesy as heck, but ultimately, these frustrations that we have, whether in our communities or in our work or in our relationships, or um, stems from not feeling seen and heard by the other person. And this goes both ways. And so ultimately, the key to helping someone want to move and change long term is recognition, seeing them. And so that's a theme that's sort of weaved its way in my life for many years. And so, there's a core thesis there. Why now? I mean, I think a couple of reasons. One, there's all this talk about the attention economy. I think there's a lot of maybe a false assumption that the way to keep people's attention is to just sort of maybe distract them or give them some sort of quick hits to like get them to look up from their phones. But I really believe that underneath that, people feel like they're not being moved, they're being missed. And folks are wanting to be reached, they're wanting to be affected, and maybe people just don't know how. So I think it speaks to both our human desire for it and what people wish that they could do for others when the stakes are high in our organizations, but also when any one person is trying to influence a group, whether that could be in a congregation, a community, a classroom, a stage, etc. So I hope it meets the cultural moment. And yeah, those are some of the reasons why.
Talk to me about the creative process meeting the moment of writing this book. You say don't do it at home. Don't write for 9 years in order to land on your thing. And I actually often think about the phrase. For me, I write a weekly newsletter, about 1,000 words published every week. I've been doing that 3 years now. And the articles that are the easiest to write and the articles that are the hardest to write, I find resonate the most, right?
Hmm.
I got married 10, 15 days ago. I wrote in 2 weeks ago a how to date, because as I calculated, I've probably been on about 1,000 first dates over the course of 20 years, right? Fortunately, I
Wow.
think I'm done with that era of my life, but I know a lot about dating. I know a lot of people who are looking for a life partner. And so this wasn't, the promised land of this is how to land a perfect partner, but this is how to go on a good date. How to find dates, how to, make them interesting, how to not get bored, how to show up optimistically. And I got a ton of feedback from a lot of people that was even my wife said, this is the best article I've ever written,
Hmm.
right? So for me, I look for what is really easy to write from my own knowledge and expertise. And then also, what are those things that I've been chewing on for a long time that I have to really think about in order to articulate my beliefs and in many ways uncover my beliefs first
Yeah.
and then articulate them.
Yeah.
And those two resonate. So what for you, why 9 years? What was the creative of this like?
First of all, congratulations. And writing 1,000 words a week is also very hard, or every other week.
Every week. Yeah.
That's very hard.
Publishing, not just writing, right? Because you have to write a lot more in order to publish 1,000
Yeah,
good words every single week.
that's a lot. Yeah, so I think it's a translation game, is kind of what you're speaking to. Writing is thinking, thinking is writing, but ultimately you have to translate what's in your head to someone else so they can understand it. And I think what I'm hearing and what you're saying is the practicality of something is super important and applicable and valuable for folks. Um, uh, and also it has to feel like folks can implement it, that it's not such a huge step that they're reading it going like, I could never do that. So we could maybe talk about the art of writing books in a way that people are excited to pick it up
To
and act on
use.
it. Yeah,
Yep.
because that is maybe a sticking point of mine of some of these books is that anyway, we can get on that
I no,
soapbox
let's
later.
let's 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 go straight to it, right? I'm thinking about when I was running Robin's Cafe, I gave Setting the Table by Danny Mayer to every single employee on their first day. Turns out you should actually do that on their 30th day or right a couple of weeks
Hmm.
in, as you know from former L&D life, because in restaurants, right, the percentage of people who stuck with us for 3 weeks was, 5% or something from day one to, but Danny Mayer setting the table was very, very practical for me for people coming in to build what I would call a responsive restaurant, right? Even more so, I find Will Guidara's Unreasonable Hospitality very functional, right? Lots and lots of people find Atomic Habits by James Clear super functional. I
Yeah.
actually think that BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits is a better book. Um, it's much more nerdy. It's much more deep in some ways, right? But I actually think it looks at the science of behavior change much more functionally, but it doesn't resonate because it's not as broad as James Clear, or it doesn't resonate as well. They were both New York Times bestsellers, so like great, they both did well. James
Yeah.
Clear is the single best-selling book in the last 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're getting at is there is a formula to what succeeds. And there's a good lesson for me in this. I'll earmark a story for later, but it's been really fun to be a student of this. And this is not something I expected. So I remember I was at a conference in Baltimore in like 2011, 2012, around there. And someone in the audience asked, who's writing a book or who plans to write a book? I looked around at everybody else. I was like, you guys are crazy. Who the heck would, like, what?
How many
No.
people raised their hands?
At least a third.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was
I mean,
like,
a lot of people say I want to write a book, having now written three. Like it's a major undertaking, and I haven't even traditionally published as you're doing.
I mean, it just seemed a three. Good for you. I mean, wow. But I just remember being like, there's no way in hell. So just be open-minded if I tell myself back then. So much can change. Uh, I guess two things. One, the idea of I think where some of these books fall short, and this is not a critique. It's more I used to hire a lot of authors to come into organizations to give keynotes or
Right.
workshops, or I did L&D for a really long time. And so I think about the utility and application of new ideas and information in the way that you're describing. And often, to quote kind of Bob Sutton and Jeffrey Pfeffer, there's a knowing doing gap between something that we read and something that we can apply for
Right.
various reasons. I think one of the things I'm trying to do in this book, and trying is a really key word, is understanding what gets in the way of these quote unquote best practices actually being implemented. And so I actually have a chapter towards the end of the book that names just that. So what might get in the way, and here's how you can think about that to try to name that, but also alleviate that for people, because any change effort, whether it's reading a book or changing the behavior of a company, there are things that get in the way. And so I think it's helpful to name that for folks so they don't feel like something's wrong with them or they're not able to implement it. But in a business book setting, my idea is more of a big idea book than a pure business book. But in a business book setting, there's many things like politics or just, being worried about losing your job that gets in the way of being like, I read this great book, but no one's going to listen to me about it. So a lot of that an author cannot control, but I do think a lot about the utility of the work.
So when we were talking about having this podcast interview, I was saying, oh, book marketing, I'm fascinated by this topic. And you were like, I'm not there yet. But actually what you just described is, if you've read Ryan Holiday's Perennial Seller, I believe is the name of the title, right? It's
Yes.
baking marketing into the topic of the book, right? If you can create a book where one person reads it and they reference it to two people who both buy it, you win, right? And if you create a book where your referral rate is less than 1, you lose, right? Yeah. Books, more than any other form of marketing I know of, are word of mouth driven. And so how have you tried to bake, but it's also meta, of course, because the topic of your book is about moving people, right? So how have you tried to bake behavior change and make it as practical as you can into the substance of the book? How are you using the book to change people's behavior?
Oh, tough question, Robin. No, it's good. I just turned in the first draft of my manuscript, so much of this might change, but there's many things to say. To your point around referral, I've learned a few good lessons about the marketing aspect of it. One is thinking about how your book can be giftable to somebody else. So why would someone want to gift it to someone? And I think for me in this book and many others that have been successful, I think a way to do that is to shape the book around an identity that people want to claim for themselves. And so I'm certainly thinking about, what is the identity here? Someone who moves someone, or you've moved me and I want you to see the impact you've had on me, or I want to get better at this skill. So thinking about how to frame it in that way is something I spend a lot of time noodling on. In terms of baking in the behavior change, the book is kind of two parts. It's one, the art and science of why we're moved. So lessons from entertainment, education, business, as I described in a 2x2 model that I have in there. And then it's the how. And so I've broken it down to a bunch of really practical tips under the model, many, many more tips than people could have at once, and they can choose what makes the most sense for them. So being as practical as possible is really the goal. Within the book, and trying to think about like a if this then this kind of approach to it. You're hearing me think out loud because, again, the manuscript is in the editing stage, but that's the current thinking. And I'm open to your ideas as well. Tell me.
Well, I care less about book marketing in this case and more about obviously the creative process. But how are you? Give me 5 tools for moving people.
Oh goodness. Well, so I talk about in the book that there's 4 different ways to move people. You can get them to comply, to inform, to be entertained, or to engage. So what kind of movement do you want? And then designing or creating, your effort for that kind of movement. And that's honestly the first practical tip. And the most important one is that not all movement is created equal. And so oftentimes we think we're getting engagement, but we're really getting compliance. And so that awareness is really key. If what we want is engagement, which means long-term buy-in, commitment, ownership, behavior change, things of that nature, that means, in my language, we need to design in a way that's pull instead of push and personalize instead of one size fits all. So the second tip is to pull instead of push. What that means is that we are influencing folks or moving folks, whether in a speaking or a teaching or a communicating way that is done with people versus at people. And then to personalize versus one size fits all, meaning that this is done about me versus about anyone. So is it, Is it anyone's riding the ride on Disneyland, the Matterhorn? Doesn't matter what the ride is like. The same people, you'll get the same experience no matter who's in line. Or does it feel like it's really made for you? And the key there is emotional connection. So seeing yourself in what someone else is saying or doing and feeling connected to what is being shared or said or done is the key. I can give you tips on each of those if you want, but
let's dig
a
into it a
general
little
framework.
more. So first of all, pull not push, I think, is a great framing for something that Doug Kirkpatrick of the Morningstar Company has said to me many times in many years. You know Doug through Responsive, which is don't use force. It was in my vows to my wife. Like that is, that's what I ran the recent Snafu conference about as well, is like what is sales or influence or persuasion without force, because it's so uncommon, it's precious in the world. And it's precious if we are doing it with another person. It's even more precious if we're doing it with ourselves, right? And I actually believe it's faster in many ways, right? If you need to rescue a child from getting hit by a bus, do whatever you have
Yes.
to do.
Yes.
And if you want greater connection, i.e., trust, i.e., the faster speed of an organization, right, then not using force, not using pull, but instead using, or not using push, but
Yeah.
using pull.
I think in the news today, we're seeing a lot of examples of, I'd call push influence. And you're right. If there's a building on fire, push is right. Get people out of the room. But oftentimes, I think what can be counterintuitive is this idea: if I push harder, say more, explain again, they'll do what I want them to do. And oftentimes, that's not really what's getting in the way. It's actually making the person who's trying to influence others feel more alone, and less supported in the change that they're trying to make. And so, the argument is to pull instead, in many scenarios, not all. And one of the best ways to do that is to give people a role in what you're trying to achieve or accomplish. So much of these lessons, or so many of these lessons, come from, I have a master's degree in organizational psychology, come from behavioral science, come from research on organizational change and the like. And what I offer in the book is examples maybe from everyday life where we see that in action, but maybe didn't have a lens for why that influenced us or moved us. A quick example might be, I went to the Eras tour. I went to see Taylor Swift a couple years ago. I called it research. But when you enter the stadium, she gives everyone a light up bracelet. And a lot of musicians do this now. And this was a way at scale to pull, to do something with her audience. And the bracelet lit up different colors depending on the song. And you felt like you had a role to play because, she needed you. And it was a visible sign
Waving the
of that.
bracelet. Yeah,
Yeah.
alongside the
Yeah.
song. Yeah.
It formed a heart at one point. Like literally, you felt like you were a part of it. So on a giant scale, that's what it looks like in the world. And in the book, I offer ways to do that more in our real non-Taylor Swift life.
Comply, inform, entertain, and engage. Can you define each of those for us?
Yeah, so comply is kind of this idea of get people to do what I want them to do, to take an action. Inform is to share information and, drive awareness, essentially. To entertain is to give a sense of delight, maybe to get someone's momentary attention. And then to engage is this idea of kind of transferring ownership of whatever it is that you're sharing. So someone's carrying it forward without you there in the room. And with compliance, once you leave the room, they're not going to do it. But with engagement, they will. And so what moves people long term and extends your influence is often the sense of engagement. And that's, what I want people to do more of. But each of those four styles is right for different kinds of needs, I would say.
And build towards increasing levels of depth, right? I wasn't sure until you defined them if it was ordered chronologically towards deeper levels of engagement, and it sounds like it is.
Yeah, I think one important thing is I'm not saying that everything has to be engagement. That's not true. So, like you said earlier, some things compliance is fine, informing is fine, entertaining is fine. The challenge comes from when people are expecting one and you give them the other, or vice versa. And especially, I think, in this world we live in today, I think we have a collective allergy to sort of being told what to do. I know that I do.
Yeah.
And so
I always have.
we could talk more about that later. Authority, like, it's just not my thing. But this idea of like, I want to be moved, I want to feel seen, I want to carry something forward, and it feels really good when it happens. And there's an art and science to why that works, and how to do that for others.
Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership did quite well. It put him on the map. And engage, like I wrote a word down next to each of these four. So comply was push, inform was educate, entertain was delight, and engage was ownership. But the problem with extreme ownership, I mean, it's in the title and it's great for what it is it's very rah. It's very, discipline, not in the practice term of the word, but in the do it harder version of the word, right? Not in the original sense of, right, ownership has become this thing that Silicon Valley and men across every discipline of the internet that I've seen say, take more ownership with aggression,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Not take more ownership with pull, with a lack of force, right? Ownership plus a lack of force is not a topic I've seen discussed yet.
That's interesting. Yeah, I worked at a few tech companies who had values, and a lot of them wanted ownership as one of those values. So it's an interesting point. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it needs to be through force. I really don't think it can be through force, to be quite honest with you. Um, so, uh, yeah, that's interesting. I want to explore that book a little bit more than
Yeah,
you.
I'm fascinated by the concept of ownership. I think we have a phrase in my family, nobody's coming, i.e., nobody's coming to save you. And when I first heard that at 23, this was family of choice. This is people I've been close with for 20 years. I was in tears. I was the idea of like, but I want someone to, right? I want mutual support. But actually, this idea of nobody's coming to save you, meaning you are here to do it for yourself. And
Yes,
if you want support, you have to ask for it. You have to
yes.
advocate for yourself and for the people that you want to move with you, right? Is to create that engagement, that ownership.
Yeah, and I think this is something I talk about in the book too, which is, you're influencing people. I'd say the category this falls under is influence, but you're not trying to get them to change necessarily. Like my job is to change you. It's basically to increase someone else's capacity to change or move themselves. That's really what this teaches, and that is the most effective long term for all the reasons that we might know or see in the literature and the research. So um, the key in writing this is to open the aperture for people to see a different way of doing this. That's the magic trick that I'm spending so much time thinking through.
I like a magic trick. I want to come back to the 2x2 because you've referenced it a bunch. But why a book? I so relate to I can't not do this. That's how I felt about starting Responsive Conference. That's how I felt about starting Robin's Cafe. The cafe is a perfect example. I mean, brick and mortar in the Mission District in San Francisco in 2016 was masochistic, and it was, but I couldn't not do it, and so I relate to that, and that clarity of purpose combats all odds. Um, in a collapsing attention economy, in a world where it's so much easier to scroll Twitter, X, or check my email obsessively, or go for a walk than it is to sit down and focus and read a book. Why did you feel compelled? Do you feel compelled to publish a book in what will be 2027?
I don't know. That's not true. Um, I I think books are still really important. I think they're how we get ideas out there, even if people put it in a tweet form. This sounds maybe selfish, but to me, I know what I'm trying to say or what I'm thinking once I write it out. And for me, I think the most valuable and sort of rewarding piece of all of this has, like I said in the beginning, finding my or claiming this identity that I thought I lost as a creative person and as a writer. And so I hope many people read it. And even if many people don't, although again, let's hope it doesn't happen. It's been such a rewarding, confidence building, beautiful experience that it almost doesn't even matter. They say the journey is the most important piece. To me, that's true. But to answer your question really specifically, I think part of what I've told other people who are writing or doing anything creative is to pay attention to the signs and what you notice about what lights you up. And I remember 2016, 15, even before, all I wanted to do was go see big idea authors speak.
Mm.
I would go see Bob Sutton speak or be on Daniel Pink's launch team for To Sell Is Human or studying Susan Cain or Adam Grant. I was like, I want to put an idea out in the world, but I didn't know what it was yet until I met Adam Grant in 2017. We did a project together for my old company, and I remember we were in Las Vegas, and I remember I asked him in the elevator on the way back down to the lobby, like how you get an idea out in the world. What is the secret? And he's like, oh, it's a crapshoot, like literally pointing at a crapshoot. and I just remember being in that elevator going like, I will take that bet. Like I just knew this is what I wanted to do, but the idea hadn't come to me yet. And I had many, many, many wonderful people who helped kind of hold that dream for me until I found it.
What is your 2x2 matrix? You've mentioned it 2 or 3 times.
Well, it wouldn't be a business-ish book without a 2x2, Robin. So, yeah, the 2x2 is my model. It's actually one of the first things I created in 2018. So this has been around the whole time. It's called the moved model. And so basically on the vertical axis at the bottom is push, at the top is pull. And then on the horizontal, on the left side is one size fits all, on the right side is personalized. And the idea that you can kind of map the ways that you want to move people in these various spectrums, and that each creates a different quadrant, like we talked about. So push and one size fits all gets you compliance, and pull and personalize gets you engagement, and then you can fill in the other two. And the idea is that you can move around this circle to sort of get the kind of movement that you want, and diagnose why this may or may not be landing for you. I use this a lot with organizations in my consulting work, usually to help them plot why their communication or their town hall or their strategy effort or their values rollout or large org change isn't landing, or what might be getting in the way, or deciding what strategy is best given what they need. So that's the 2x2.
Talk to me about some of the learnings that you've had as a writer over the last few years. Like, who are you that is different than who you were in 2018? And as somebody who has not yet published any traditionally published books, and regularly, even though I publish my weekly newsletter, have crises of conscience where I'm wondering about the utility of writing in the world of AI slop, but also, AI editing and AI generation, and it will only continue to get better. Like, talk to me about how your views of writing have changed.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the best things that I've done, and this could be for anyone you could be writing, you could be trying to get an idea into market or a company into market, is just to tell as many people as possible about what you're doing. I think this idea of like kind of keeping it a secret is maybe something I thought was necessary, but ultimately I've learned so much and become better, and the idea has become better just by talking about it with people. And so concretely, I think one of the ways I'm different or change is because of one of those pieces of feedback. And when you write a book, you write a proposal first, the business case for it, Robin, as you know, and you send it around to people. And I remember talking to an agent, and I thought, because I've been a student for this for so long, that the key was to copy everybody else. And so I thought, since I'm, not a famous person, that I should, show my credibility by like really theoretical language and like really serious writing. And I think I had this idea that I had to sort of be somebody else in order to succeed. And I remember this agent saying to me, like, the only way that this book is going to sell is if it's your voice and it comes from you. And he said, I think you're hiding. And I started crying because it was so true and so beautiful. And I think if I'm writing a book about why people are seen and heard, I need to be okay with being seen and heard myself. And ultimately, that is the risk of putting your idea out there. And so, I remember what he says all the time. But what that meant for me in the writing was leaning into more of the emotion behind it, showing more of myself, more of my story, and uh, not just sort of relying on my head, but more of my heart, which sounds cheesy, but is really important because your readers want to connect with you. That's ultimately why they're not just buying the book, but want to hear you share more and learn from you. So that's been one.
I think a lot about how much of self to share in books that I write or in books that I read. So Ryan Holiday, maybe in his foreword or as an afterword, will have a brief note about himself, but it's 100% about external stories and usually stories from history. Robert Greene, a mentor of his, is the same. Um, Brene Brown maybe is somewhere in between, where she has stories about herself and her husband and her kids, but will tell stories primarily about other people and then tie it back to herself or vice versa. And then we have maybe, where I got started in business books, the Tim Ferrisses of the world, who are self experimenting with their own, right? This is how I'm exploring body change, right? The 4 Hour Body, or business, the 4 Hour Work Week. This is my kind of journalistic exploration of a topic and then distilling that into practice for other people. Those aren't the only three, but those are three that I think of. Where do you fall in that, and how do you navigate that?
I mean, I think I've been studying the Brene Brown formula a little bit, specifically in Strong Ground, her new book, which opens with a relatable story of when she realized she needed to get better at the skill that she teaches in the book. And that is a really great formula for a book to start. And I've tried to copy that in mine. Ideally, what that does is it helps the reader trust the driver and trust that you are just like them and that you sort of are figuring this out too, or had a need to figure this out. And so I got that great advice from someone about 6 months ago, and that changed the entire way I opened the book. The kind of like how much of yourself do you put in there? I don't. The part that's the most personal is not until the very end, the very last chapter. There's various reasons for that. One of which is I think there still is an element to me that I have to earn it. Like they have to have a reason to care maybe by the end. And so to me, it's a bit of a, not a crescendo, but like laying the groundwork for sort of the end of that story and connecting more. But also I take a lesson from educators and professors that I talk about in the book, which is you have to meet people where they are, which is what they already know and what they already care about versus what you care about. So all that to say, it's like kind of a balance, but the first two chapters are just about me. Like no one really cares. I have to meet them where they are and with what they know and what their language is. So it's a bit of a balance.
Yeah, I think about celebrity books, which is to say, people that presumably people want to hear more about than anyone else don't tend to do well unless that person is an author.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, they might sell lots and lots of books. And I'm not even thinking maybe some of Obama's books did very, very well and continue to sell, but like actual Hollywood celebrity books, right? Because they don't do enough of practical solving for the reader.
Hmm.
And so how do you write in a way, and this is back to where we started. I'm looking at The Creative Habit on my bookshelf in front of me by Rick Rubin. Like, how do you create habits for your reader? And then from there we'll go into what are some of your writing habits before we close today.
How do I create habits for my reader? In
Yep,
the book, you mean?
in the book.
It's a really good question, Robin. So glad I'm not done writing it yet. Um, I mean, I think the thing I'm thinking about the most is maybe I said this in the beginning, giving people a lens to sort of see influence or movement or maybe the world even more differently. And I think that maybe is the most helpful thing. The the model I talk about a lot because it gives people a common language that I think can make maybe these more theoretical or kind of nerdy topics more layman's language that people can then adopt in their organization. So maybe that's the most kind of habit forming. If we think about the success of a book like Radical Candor, people are using the same language. And I hope that is a similar kind of thing here of, okay, we need more push or we need less push, we need more personalization versus, I don't know why that didn't land. I don't know why that strategy rollout didn't work. I don't know. I can't name this ethereal feeling, but now I know what this needs. And so I think that is maybe the way I'm trying to instill a habit most of all is through common language. Um, and then you asked me about my writing habits.
Yep, that was where I was going to go next.
Yeah, I what are my writing habits? I wish I could say I woke up every day. I was like, and I write, 3 pages, and I do a Julia Cameron thing, and I'm. That's not really what I tend to do. Um, I think what's been ingrained in me is I go for a walk many times a day if I can, to think things through, and usually with nothing in my ears. Um, that's incredibly useful. Or go for a drive, or when I'm trying to think something through, just like, you know, get out of the laptop. Um, the other thing I'll say, and this is less of a habit and more of something I've noticed about myself, is that when for the end of the book, it's a bit more personal, a bit more emotional. And I needed to kind of get myself in that emotional state. So I'd either listen to the same song over and over and over again, or I went and I watched Hamnet, a very sad movie, to put myself in that mental state too. So I have to kind of tap into the emotion I'm trying to express in order to put it on the page.
Something I've been doing recently, I'm very guilty of taking the dog for a walk with a podcast playing, an audiobook maybe, and trying to train myself to not do that. And instead, when the thoughts occur as I'm walking, to take notes. I've been really enjoying Whisper Flow, which is audio transcription that actually works. Having been using audio transcription since Dragon Dictate in the 1990s, I've finally found one that is useful. And so, yeah, I like that challenge yourself to go for a walk without stimulus.
It's interesting you say that. So the day I turned in my manuscript, the first draft, like 4 weeks ago, the next day I went to a spa with my family. I was like, I'm getting out and going to a spa, but I brought a notebook, and I was like laying in a hammock, and every 5 minutes I would get up and go write something down because these ideas I was like, oh, I guess I really am a writer again. Like it kind of keeps, you know, coming out of you like a water spout. So having a notebook nearby, or just emailing myself something, is really helpful too.
Any other habits or tactics for writing consistently or writing a lot, which writing a book requires?
I don't always practice this, so take note, but I try to write without editing first. Um, and then edit later. It's a different set of muscles, a different kind of skill set in your brain. And it's really hard and very constricting if you're trying to edit what you write as you write it.
Yeah,
So
I think that's
yeah.
actually a good definition of writer's block. I've increasingly come to think that if you're trying to adjust what you're writing, even as you're putting it on a page for the first time, it's actually impossible, because you say they're two separate tasks.
Yeah. Yeah. Very hard to do, but I think necessary to be uncomfortable with it not being great. And to remember, to everyone who's trying to write something, writing is rewriting a million gajillion times. And that's the fun of it, and the frustration. So get comfortable with it.
How many times have you rewritten some of the sentences in your
Oh my
book?
God. Oh, hundreds. I rewrote my book proposal probably 30 times. I mean, it's been 9 years. So I don't, I don't know if there's anything that has outlived the original manuscript. Just so many. I can't even count, but a lot.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible to take, I don't know, a B minus sentence or paragraph or idea and turn it into an A plus idea through rewriting? Do you have to start with raw material? Like if I'm going to make a clay pot and I don't play in ceramics, I have to have good substance to start with in order to make a really fine finished piece.
Hmm. Um, can only speak for myself. I think the the raw materials of my book have always been there since that idea in 2017. But what has changed the most is sort of the outwards packaging and how I talk about it and put it together. So I'm trying to think of a metaphor for clay, but you know, you can take something from a B minus to an A, uh, if you're clear on what that outside packaging is supposed to be. Um, so yeah, I think it's possible. But so much of book writing is thinking about who it's for, what it's supposed to do, why people would buy it, and so the writing influences. Your writing is only as good as your clarity about what you want the book to do and what it's about and what it isn't. And that to me was such a key part of that 9-year struggle with getting to that clarity.
I think that's as good as anything else to end on. Where can folks go? Obviously, your book hasn't come out yet. It's coming out in March of 2027. But where can folks go to learn more about you, maybe sign up to learn about the book in the future, etc.?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Folks can go to my website, which is gatheringeffect.com, or just my name, lindseycaplan.com. And I have a mailing list there where I'm sharing some of the ideas from the book, and all the information will be there. And I'm also on LinkedIn quite a bit, so folks can follow me as well on LinkedIn.
Great. Gatheringeffect.com and join the newsletter.
Yeah, fantastic.
Lindsey, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I can't wait to read it, and I appreciate everything you've shared.
Yeah, thanks so much, Robin. Thanks for having me.